Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT and Oro Muscles. Joining me today is Mackenzie Hammond. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mackenzie for quite some time, dating back to when she was a PT student. In this episode, Mackenzie and I dive into her story and journey as an athlete, as a clinician, and as a person overall. We cover everything relating from her ACL injury to her soccer career and her college playing career to her journey in PT school and ultimately leading up to where she is today as a physical therapist in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. This is a great episode with someone that I think very highly of, and I know you're going to love it. Enjoy. Mackenzie, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. For people who maybe don't know you as well as I do, or perhaps they, knew you when you were Mackenzie Myers, and now you're Mackenzie Hammond. Would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the amazing things that you've been doing that way?
Yeah. So I went to undergrad in Philly at Holy Family where I played soccer and then I'm from the DC area. Went back down to Maryland for PT school. So I was at University of Maryland Eastern Shore for 3 years, lived in Salisbury. One of my clinicals was actually with Tyre. So I was one of Dan's students when I was at Athlete Academy. And then I actually was given the opportunity to continue working and just like helping out around the clinic. So I did that my last year. Just graduated this September, took my boards in October, and then just started working this January. So, and I'm back in Philly now. I'm working for ATI.
Yeah, it's funny because I just couldn't get rid of you, Mackenzie. I
Yep.
wish we could have kept you a little bit longer, but obviously I love what you're doing up there in Philly, and I know you love your life that way, and you're back involved in soccer and all that way, which is absolutely phenomenal. But I know at one point in the past that soccer had to kind of like disappear for a little while for you back when you were in middle school or high school or something like that. I can't quite remember the
Yep.
exact details, but I know that there was a period of time, roughly 9 to 12 months, where soccer just like disappeared for a second, if you will.
Yes. So I was 13 when I tore my ACL. I was playing on a travel Maryland Rush soccer team, and it was actually one of my like last spring season games. And I had all my friends come out, and I was like, "All right, come to our last game." And I just remember like running with a girl, and then just like being on the ground. And I like tried to get back up because it was a foul, take a free kick, and I just like fell again. And I kept trying to walk, and I just couldn't. And I was so young that I wasn't really in pain, that I was just freaking out. So I like was hyperventilating, and my parents were like, "You always get knocked down. Like, what's going on?" I ended up going to the ER, the whole nothing's broken, go to the ortho, get the MRI. And me, I'm like fine at this point. I'm running around. Like I had a little brace on. And I'll never forget, I go to the ortho and I sit down. And I was 13. So again, like this didn't make any sense to me. He's like, "You tore your ACL, meniscus, MCL." And I'm just like, whatever. Like, I don't know
You're,
what that
you're
means.
like, cool, great.
And he's like, "But you're gonna have to do some rehab like before surgery, and then you'll be out for like 6 to 12 months." And I just sat there because I was going into freshman year of high school and I was ready to play soccer, like varsity soccer, if I could, and all this stuff. And it didn't hit me obviously until like I had the surgery that I was like, "Oh, this is serious. Like this is actually happening."
Absolutely insane. And I think that 13 is probably one of the younger ends of, the age range that I've heard of someone injuring their ACL with. But it's so funny knowing the kind of person that you are now. I'm just like picturing young Mackenzie in my mind, just like, oh, cool. I tore my ACL, MCL, meniscus.
Yeah.
Like, great. What does that mean? Like, I feel like it would be so difficult to really grasp the weight of the situation when you're 13 years old, regardless of who the doctor is or how much they explain it to you. It's just like, at that point, like you've never really experienced any kind of injury before. You're just like invisible. You're made of rubber and magic, I like to say. You bounce back from everything, and we have no idea how. And then it's like all of a sudden some serious injury comes about, and it's like, oh, this is like my first reality check. And I feel like it kind of like forces people to grow up very early, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a like huge shock to me, especially because soccer was my whole life, like not just club soccer, travel soccer. I was ready for high school. I wanted to run track, and your whole life revolves around athletics and then it's just shut down. Definitely was a mental and physical barrier.
Yeah, because, at the time, like you said, you invited all your friends out. Like it's like part of your identity is almost in sport that way. You're probably like the soccer girl. I know that wasn't your Snapchat username. It wasn't like Kenzie played soccer or anything that way, but, it's like having those things disappear for a period of time. It's just really scary when you're young that way. I'm curious because you and I have talked in the past about like rehab and physical therapy and different things that way. What was it like for you following that ACL injury that way? If you can remember that long ago, what did that process in rehab look like? And what are your kind of thoughts on what all you were kind of taken through that way, if you will?
Yeah, so I actually, going back to when my surgeon said we're going to do surgery, since I was so young, he was a little iffy since he didn't think my growth plates were completely fused, if like I still had a little growing to do. So that whole summer was kind of up in the air, like, is he going to do the surgery? They had decided like I'm not going to grow. I didn't. I'm the same height I was when I was 13 as I am now. So good choice. But so I waited all summer and had like a very normal summer, like went tubing, water skiing, like again, didn't really hit me. And then I had the surgery in the end of August, right before school started. And I passed out my first PT appointment, went to the appointment, was crutching in there, like sat down in the waiting room. So I worked for this PT clinic and it was called Kinesis. They're no longer. I worked there like as a tech all throughout the rest of my high school. So I walked in there, like tried to crutch back, slipped, fell, don't remember it, like didn't have PT, obviously went home. Then went back. My PT, her name was Christine. I'll never forget her. She was like my best friend because I was there 3 days a week all summer until school started. And then I would go before school. So I'd be there every morning at like 7 a.m., 3 days a week for like probably 5 or 6 months. But she was actually pregnant at the time. So in the last like 3 months of my rehab, when I started return to running, I had a different PT. And that was super weird for me because I made a bonding experience with her. I liked her. And not that the other PT was bad. He was filling in for her. So he wasn't even actually like an employee at that clinic. So I didn't also really know him. Obviously, rehab went fine. I did have some hyperextension issues. Like I never gained more than zero back, which now as a PT and especially working with you, I know heel pops are very important in the early phase, which I guess either I didn't have or I lost. So I actually had to go back to PT probably like 6 months after being cleared to play. I didn't stop playing, but I was having like running sprinting issues. So I would literally just go back and do everything extension wise. But yeah, I just remember like being happy to see Christine. There was definitely days I cried. I remember like when she was trying to bend my knee, straighten my knee, I would have like tears running down my face. And again, I didn't really understand why. And I'm sure she tried to explain it. And as a PT now, I understand the importance, but I was like, why is she doing these things that hurt my knee? And again, meniscus prolonged the walking. So I was like on crutches for a period of time, which was hard. I remember like wanting to go out in the summer, and my parents were like, "You can't go to the movies because how are you going to crutch up and down the stairs?" You know, things that I was used to being able to do on my own that I no longer could do on my own. I remember I was in a Chipotle and I like fell on my crutches. I fell a lot on my crutches. Somebody I don't think trained me how to use those. But yeah, looking back to it, definitely I had a really good bonding experience with my PT, and that's actually why I first started getting interested. I was like, oh, like I could be a physical therapist one day. Like, what does that take? I did like sciences and whatnot going into high school, so I kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And then I think my sophomore year I was a tech, so I knew I needed hours, and then I was trying to kind of figure out what schooling was going to look like if I could do a shorter program where it was like a 3+3, but then I wanted to play soccer, so I ended up not doing that. But yeah, I kind of that whole injury caused me to really like fall in love with the profession, especially because my PT was just kind of my rock during my rehab. But definitely pushed me to where I am today.
It's so crazy the impact that PT and like those early experiences can have on life that way. And to your point, I'd imagine all of the different things you were feeling, the like confusion about different things that were going on, the, misunderstanding or just like the pass out and different things that way. Like, I've certainly heard stories like that from people in the past. I've certainly seen athletes cry on day one, or, I had one cry today. She's a little bit further out than day one. So those kind of things definitely do happen, unfortunately. And to your point, it's certainly one of those things where it's like, I don't think everyone fully grasps the importance of things. So it's like trying to find ways to kind of relate what they know to what they don't know that way to try and make them like understand it a little bit better that way. Because this space is wacky and weird and confusing, and there's a lot of good information, there's a lot of misinformation, and it's just such a confusing space. But I think that there's a lot of thoughts and potential. There's a lot of thoughts that I have about kind of like chatting about that, like rehab for like the like super young athlete, 12, 13 years old, first time getting injured. But the other thing that I really think is so cool and so unique about you is just that how that experience molded and shaped to where you are at today in
Mhm.
life that way, and how that kind of like pushed you into this like physical therapy rehab space that way. And it's something that I hear a lot from other athletes that way, where it's like they get injured and then it's like, oh my gosh, like this PT thing is actually kind of cool. Like, could I
Yeah.
make like a career of this, like helping other people, working with athletes, doing things like that? And, I like to say that I'm trying to avoid the NARP life. And it's like, with PT, or at least on your feet, active, doing stuff, showing exercises all day long for the most part that way. Like it feels a little bit more right to me than just like sitting in a cubicle somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned about the ACL, the knee injury, and different things that way. And obviously, there's a lot of considerations that go into that first major injury, especially as a young female athlete. I've seen some of the young guys get injured, and they're just kind of like, whatever. And for some reason, some of them just bounce back like it's nothing. Like, there's one kid that I worked with who, like, missed 8 months of ACL rehab, and he ended up being fine. Like, it blows my mind. I don't know how he did it. I don't endorse it by any means, but like, good for you, dude. Like, you might be the one in a million that way. But like, I guess I'm curious, how did that shape what you currently do from a clinical practice now kind of thing? Like, do you have special interest in working with athletes who have had ACL injuries or female athletes or anything like that? Or how did that kind of experience in the past really help to kind of shape where you're at today?
Yeah, I think definitely the main thing for me, especially as a student and now as like a entry level PT, just knowing that no matter what the PT come or the patient comes in diagnosis wise, like it's not just another ACL, like everyone's so different. And again, that comes with age. So knowing like if you're working with a 13-year-old or a 50-year-old, they're going through something that a lot of people don't understand. So I'm happy that I went through it because like some of those days were some of the lowest days. Like I didn't have soccer, I was in pain, I really couldn't do anything by myself. So just having that in the back of my mind and creating the relationship with my patients, I think is what I learned the most from that because it does matter. Like you could just say your highs and buys, do their exercises, but like actually talking to them, making sure that they know what you're doing and vice versa has definitely sculpted me the most. I am still very interested in working with athletes. I actually coach two girls teams right now, one middle school, one high school team, club teams. And just like working with them, I was already just talking to the head coach, wanting to like implement some like PT stuff because we actually did have a player that tore their ACL this fall. And it's that age, that eighth grade, ninth grade year where the girls aren't lifting weights, they're not strength training, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. We don't have access to facilities like that, but I could get bands and we could do a lot of like hip burners in the beginning of practice, stuff to just like get their minds rolling that like if they plan on playing in high school and college, there's things that need to be done to keep you healthy. And what I think is crazy is that we don't really get that education as high school athletes. Maybe now more than what I received, and especially in club teams. But that kind of is like making my head roll. Currently, I'm just working in like a general outpatient clinic. I just wanted to get my feet wet and kind of just learn as I go throughout my first year or so. But definitely interested in continuing on and working with athletes and especially female athletes. I know there's so much research and there's new research too about like menstruation and ACL tear and everything else. So I know that there's so much to dive into with all of that. But definitely something I want to go into more, hopefully in the next year or so.
Yeah, 100%. There's so much new information coming out. And I mean, I look at it and I say, like, about time, because I definitely think the female athlete was a little underrepresented in a lot of the research that was being done for a long period of time. So I certainly am a fan of the paradigm shift, because I don't think it's like a secret to anyone that some of these injuries are significantly more common in females than males. When I was in PT school myself, if there was like a question about like, overall like overview of like a condition where it was like, is it more common in males or females? I always guessed females.
Mhm.
And I guess it worked enough to help me get to where I'm at today and get my degree and stuff that way. I laugh about it, but it's also like, it's unfortunate that a lot of the research was initially not done in females for female dominant injuries. So I think that there's certainly a huge space and huge potential for a lot of the things that you mentioned, like prevention programs, to kind of dive into that space. But I think, like anything, the thought is good. It's about the follow through and the follow up that actually matters because, you could have the most perfect program ever written to prevent injuries, and athletes not do it because they don't like you as a person or they don't trust you or whatever it is that way. So I think that really honing in on people skills and honing in on your ability to form actual connections and relations with people is just as important as the actual book side of things, or the book knowledge side of things, I should say that way. And I think that so many people overlook that. They overlook how important it is to actually connect with the athlete, especially, you know it because you went through it yourself. It's like, if I'm staring at a 12-month rehab, if I don't like the person I'm working with, I don't want to show up. I don't want to put in work. They said do something at home. Well, why would I do that? What did they know? I don't even like them, right? Like those are the kind of thoughts that get rolling through the head. And I love that you're able to kind of bridge the gap between the work that you do clinically with the work that you do on the soccer side. And I just think it's absolutely incredible that you kind of get to be on the other side of the sport now and turn around and give back to like the next generation of people that, are basically in the shoes that you were in not that long ago.
Yeah, it definitely is full circle. I know my dad always says, like, you have to give back to your sport. And I hated wrestling. So I was like, well, I guess coaching's the other option.
I don't know why, but I don't see you as a referee.
Yeah, the parents screaming, the kids screaming. It was too high stress.
Not for you.
No.
I would imagine coaching can be high stress sometimes, though.
It is, but we have a really good group of girls and they're close, which is a big benefit as well. And like their parents are all awesome. And I mean, when you're playing on a travel team and high level like this, they know, it's not like a rec league where it's like, oh, my son or daughter isn't playing. Like they know they're there, like they're ready to work. They're traveling hours for games. So it's definitely an honor to like be able to work with such a great group of girls, but I'm sure it's different on every team. So
What do you feel that you learned clinically that helps you from a coaching standpoint, and vice versa? What do you feel you've learned from playing and coaching that's helped you clinically?
yeah, it's definitely clinically to coaching. Knowing that the players can do a lot more than what they think they can do and what like the normal person thinks they can do. And again, obviously you have to think about when games are, when practices are, but like I'll do a lot of like the fitness drills in the morning or in the beginning of practice. And it's like I know at like U12 or U13, like how much these girls, one, energy wise, and two, can actually handle. So I think that's changed a lot of kind of how much we throw at them. And yeah, sure, they definitely hate when they're like, oh, Coach Mackenzie's running. But the main coach, Coach Leanne, does the same thing. Like she played college soccer with me. So we both know when we played ourselves in college, like we didn't think we were capable of half the things we were doing. I barely did any lifting before I went to college. And day one, our trainer was like, all right, do a hang clean. And I was like, a what? Like I had no idea. So the things you can learn and pick up and even accomplish in the first preseason, 3 weeks, a month, it's your body's capable of so much, but a lot of the times you yourself aren't going to push it. So it's like you need someone to push you. And then vice versa, coaching and playing to clinically. Probably more of that like mental aspect of like checking in on people. I know college soccer was a lot, not just physically, which physically definitely my first year I got destroyed, just being sore every day, like never getting a break in the fall, which I mean pushed me to like where I am now. Like I can never sit still. I love working out. Like I love being sore and everything else, but definitely mentally knowing that some of these girls and some of my patients need a break. And again, that comes with having a relationship with your patients. Like if they come in and something happened in their day or just like their injuries flared up, it's good to know like, hey, it's okay not to have an 100% day. Like let's tone things down and do something else. And I think that's definitely something I learned from playing and coaching to kind of transfer it into my patients and like how I'm treating now.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly sounds like there's sort of some kind of system of checks and balances built into your college soccer experience at Holy Family that way, where you had that support system or support group built into the sport itself that way. And on top of that, if it wasn't that quote unquote good day, if not all the boxes were checked, whether it's like, hey, look, like slept awful last night, or, the dog was barking, or whatever it is, whatever happened that way, I think that having something like that built in to kind of like, make others aware of that and make sure that you are still getting everything that you need is really, really essential that way. And I'm curious too, because I know you played a number of years at Holy Family that way, and you said year one was really like a challenging year for you, kind of like a welcome to college athletics kind of thing by the sounds, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I hear that from a lot of other athletes when they kind of make that transition into the college world. It's like it's different than high school, and they can tell that it's different and the workload is different. And it's just like a tough process to transition initially. And I'm curious, what do you feel helped you transition successfully into that college, environment, if you will, of sport that way? And what were kind of the wins, losses, successes, and, maybe not failures, but maybe things that we could have developed a little bit more when we were in college in relation to soccer that way?
Yeah, so definitely like back to just like overall fitness. Like I ran because I liked to run, but I didn't lift really much before. And sure, like our coaches provided us like a lifting program, especially because I wasn't local. And Holy Family, a lot of the players are from like the PA and Jersey area, so can kind of like do stuff in the summer before preseason. So like the lifting was definitely a rude awakening. Like we were in a dorm room, so of course, me and my roommate Lena had to like crawl up under our beds. And I remember just leaving after that whole first week. Like I could barely get up into my bed. I was just, my body had it. I was like, how am I going to do another practice? And, sophomore year preseason rolls around and we're all dreading it. And it's like, wow, like we just kept saying, oh, like coach isn't making preseason hard. But then we realized like preseason's hard. We're just now in shape more than we were freshman year. Same thing happens junior, same thing happens senior year preseason. It was like, oh, like I guess maybe it's not that it's not hard. It's like we're in better shape. We're in soccer shape. We're actually playing. That was definitely hard. And then also just we can laugh about it now, but my roommate and I on the first night of preseason like both cried separately in our room. And like at that point, this is a stranger. I didn't know this girl. She was crying silently in her bed. I was crying silently in my bed. And obviously now one of my best friends. We like told each other a year later, like, yeah, the first night we moved into the dorms for preseason, like I cried. And she's like, I cried, you cried, I cried. And, it's a lot to absorb. You're away from your family for the first time. You're experiencing physical and mental challenges. We were so lucky with my team. Like all the girls were close. We had two like main women coaches, and they were able to bond with us, and like they would have us to like their house for team dinners, and they made it a family, which I think is definitely something like I'll always not take for granted. But looking back, I miss that. Like having 21, 25 sisters, like we all went to practice together, went to 5 a.m. lift together, had midnight practices together, went to team dinners together. So that got you through is definitely just that transition is hard. And for some people, it's hard enough that they leave and they don't stay. And it's definitely, I always say it's worth it to stay and just see where it goes. But
100%. You got to see how it plays out. And, as we've said a million times, you have to keep the plot line interesting. And it
oh,
sounds
yeah.
like college soccer certainly kept the plot line good for you. And there was some really high highs and some low lows. But, at the end of the day, I think those hills and valleys make you appreciate life even more that way. If every day's the same, it just kind of gets old and monotonous after a while. So, you got to keep the plot interesting, as the kids are saying these days.
Yep.
And I can't help but notice too, like as you were talking, you mentioned freshman year was just a big challenge initially from a physical standpoint, but then sophomore year going on the high of highs, you played defense in soccer, yet you scored a goal sophomore
Yep.
year. And it's not every day that I talk with someone who plays defense that actually scores. Like they always talk to me about how like they dream of scoring, but like they don't actually ever get the opportunity, or like maybe they do and like, oh, header on a corner and it goes out of bounds or something like that. But you like did the thing that I know a lot of people talk about, scoring a goal in a collegiate game that way. And I'd imagine you have that memory like burned into your brain like that at this point.
Yeah, definitely. So I played outside back. I played center back in high school and club, but I just like wasn't big enough, and we had two pretty solid center backs. So I was like talking to the coach, like, how can I get more playing time? She was like, would you play on the wing? So I kind of started training more on the wing, and like I was already into running, so like learning. We used our wingers as pretty much like offense and defense, so like up and down the field. So that was something that was like a transition for me. Like you always want to have more playing time. Definitely remember the goal. Sophomore year was the year we went to the championships. We went to the championship sophomore and senior year. Unfortunately, lost in both chips sophomore and senior year. But just knowing like everyone contributed to get us there, and like we were so close, and like everyone was so excited to just be in playoffs, and then like to do so well in playoffs to be able to like travel. And senior year was a little lame just because it was COVID year, so we did make it to the championships. It was a weird spring season. And we got another year to play, but obviously I had plans to go to PT school. Another senior was going to farm school. So like not many of us stuck around for a fifth year, but still made it to the chip. And got to play home field advantage technically, even though it wasn't on our college field, but we played at like a local high school stadium. But yeah, like those playoff memories were something that like burns into your head. Winning that game to go to the championship, everyone freaking out, being so excited, so nervous.
Yeah, I would imagine the energy on field and just from your whole team that way is just electric when something like that happens. That's something that, I didn't really get to experience myself that way. I played sports, but we were not really any good. I think when I played baseball in school, I think there was only one game that we didn't get mercy ruled. Like it was awful. So I just imagine that environment of knowing that, you just won a game and now you're off to the championship. Like the energy, everyone rushing the field and everything that way, it's just got to be absolutely incredible for you that way. And I think going back to what we mentioned earlier about like the high of highs that way, those are the kind of peaks and core memories that you just like never forget in life. And it's like, I think those are the kinds of things that kind of drive your passion and purpose later on, like especially in relation to coaching. It's like now, how can I take that moment that I had and turn around and give it to as many other the next generation of soccer? How can I give that moment to other girls as well? How can I get them to experience this and kind of make it like their time to shine and my time to just kind of like turn around and just kind of nod my head satisfied, like look at the work we did kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely.
I think the other piece that really stands out to me as well is I think one of the things I've learned about you is you're willing to play any role you're called to play. And you mentioned that in relation to your own journey. It's like, hey, look, I'm part of a team. I'm part of something bigger. Like, yes, I grew up playing center back, but if I've got to shift to the wing and it helps out for the greater good, like I'm willing to make that transition. And I think that that's something that's really, really unique and difficult to find these days. I meet a lot of people that are very set in their ways and they're not willing to change anything for anyone anytime.
Mhm.
And it's like, sometimes if you just give a little bit, if you just learn to bend, not break, it actually kind of like leads you to this really cool, unique place. Like, hypothetically speaking, like maybe you stayed at center back. Would you have scored that goal? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't
Mhm.
know. But I think that there's a lot of good that comes from being able to like shift and adapt to whatever life throws at you at that point. And I think that that's something that I saw you do throughout college as well. That way is, you're kind of getting pulled to different ways or different things that way. And I think that your ability to adapt to that is really, really like beneficial or valuable, or I don't even know what the
Mhm.
right adjective is for it. Where
Yeah.
did that come from, you think? Like, how did you kind of develop that skill of just being able to like flow like water that way, if you will?
Yeah, I definitely I just think like growing up in athletics in general just made me realize how much a team sport is. I did run track in high school. And again, that's a lot more like individual based for performance, but it's still such a team sport. And I think like having my parents put me in sports and like just like I did lacrosse my senior year. I have no hand-eye coordination, but just being able to like they needed help. I joined the team. I ran. I tried to play defense. I got a lot of fouls called on me. But just I don't know. I like love being a part of a team and like doing things for other people. Um, Especially at Holy Family, like when you like look back at it, it's like all those friendships you made and like all the things you did together, and whether, obviously there was 25 girls we fought, like it's gonna happen, but just like thinking back to all the memories, and like I guess like I would do anything for any of them, and like thinking that back into the time, like for example, playing time. And when you have freshmen come in that are rock solid, amazing, and take a sophomore, junior, senior spot, sure that stings, but at the end of the day, like what's important is that your team's doing better. And I think that's something that like college athletes definitely have, and you go to play for sure. Like you're going to whatever school you choose, whether it's D3, D2, D1, because you want to play the sport, because you like to play it. So getting someone that like says, oh, like this person's coming in, they're so good, they're this, that, all conference, whatever. And if they're better for your team, like cheer them on, root them on, get them a cup of water when they come off for a sub when it's like your time to go in. It's those things when you're looking at the bigger picture, which sure, I'm sure in high school I would have been furious and like, I want to play. What do you mean? But I think that's something I learned in college. Like, you're on a team, like, this is for the team, not for you. It doesn't matter if you play your best game as long as like you're doing it for everyone else. And definitely got ingrained the 4 years I was playing there. Just like do things for everyone else and everyone's going to better from it. Definitely not an easy thing to swallow.
No, I can imagine. And it's one of those things that I think takes everyone a little bit of time to adjust to that way. And I mean, I certainly can relate to your story that way. I just think about where I was as a young little freshman going into college, and I was just such a freaking idiot. Like, I
Yeah.
was just so freaking dumb. Freshman year, Dan was just such a freaking idiot. And then, like, the more I kind of like went about the process of learning and doing stuff and just
Growing.
exploring things, the more I kind of like came to this conclusion that it's really just about lifting other people up. And the more you help others, the more you're going to help yourself. Maybe not directly, maybe not immediately, but the more you pour into others, like the better you're going to be yourself that way. And the way I've kind of like explained it to people lately, Patrick Lewis just mentioned this analogy to me, and I've loved it, and I've used it like a million times ever since he mentioned it. But like the way I look about it is like you helping others builds a bigger glass for yourself. You taking care of yourself puts more water into that glass. It's as simple as that. So if
Yeah.
you want to fulfill yourself to the max, then you need to help others and take care of yourself, but you can't just do one, you have to do both.
I love that. Yeah, definitely.
The other thing that I find really unique and interesting about you too is that you decided or elected to not take that additional year. And you kind of said, you know what, look, like, COVID happened, and unfortunately, it's not necessarily the terms I wanted to go out on, but, my time is here that way. And I'd imagine that was a very difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around about, like, not necessarily getting to go out on the terms that you might have originally planned on or expected to go out on that way. And I know there's a lot of athletes out there that struggle with that concept of sport is going to eventually end for
Mhm.
them. Eventually the cleats get hung up. Eventually the ball doesn't come out every single day anymore. And it's just such a different way of life. So, how did you kind of go about approaching or coping or dealing with that end of sport moment, if you will?
Yeah, so definitely as like fall being a soccer being a fall sport, you expect senior year to be, let's go, let's win this championship, let's be done in November, right? Like we don't really as seniors participate in like the winter training or like the spring season as much. But when COVID happened and like we lost our fall year, and there were so many rules and regulations, like we were training with masks on our field, like looking back to that, it was so weird, and a lot of it had to be like captain led. So like the captains, we all had to call practice. Like the coaches couldn't be at certain things. It was just everything was very, very weird. Obviously, everything with COVID was weird. Having a spring season was also very strange, and knowing that we were able to come back in the fall was definitely something that we all thought about. Some people did take their extra year, but I had already gotten into UMES, which was my top choice for PT. And I was kind of already set, like, I'm ready to start working and, like, let's get this over with. Like, let's start my academic 3 years and, like, let's let it fly. So it was hard for me not to continue playing because leaving was definitely a lot to deal with. But when going to PT school, I had a friend that I went to high school with and ran track with, Gabby Go, who went to UMES, and she's a big runner. So when she would run, like as her main stress coping mechanism, and just as she was training, I was like, oh, like I'm gonna start running more. So I just started training for half marathons, and that's how I dealt with being a narc. Like I wasn't an athlete anymore. What do I do? Like I don't have a list to do tomorrow morning. I was so used to being scripted things. Sure, I had 4 years of lists that I and like knowledge that I could use myself. But I was so used to being like today, like Monday, Wednesday at 5 a.m., we're doing this. So it was hard for sure to manage. But I also had my roommates and friends who would like lift in the garage with me in Fruitland and like go on runs with me. So definitely a weird like loss of identity when you stop being an athlete and realize like you have to find time in your own day now to do it yourself.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a paradigm shift for sure. And I think that to your point, having other individuals around you who are also in the same shoes definitely makes it a lot easier to manage that way. And I can't remember how many times saw you posting about runs you were doing and different things that way. And I think that that social media element helps as well because then it's like it's not just you doing it for yourself, but you're also sharing it with other people. And you never know who that might inspire or impact or encourage to do the same thing. Unfortunately, I still have not gotten the motivation to start running yet, but it might find me someday. Or maybe I'm just so fast that I'm able to elude it for right now, one of the two. But you also mentioned that UMES was the dream school, and I'm interested to hear more about that because I'll be honest, I'd never heard of UMES until I moved to Salisbury. I was like, oh, there's a school here. That's cool. That's great. It was really like a like light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, there's actually stuff on the Eastern Shore. Like I had never been here before. I'd like,
Yeah.
just kind of packed up and moved here, and I was like, okay, what is this place? Like, I guess I had a lot to learn. So, what made you decide, like, look, UMES is going to be it for me. This is where I'm going to spend next 3 years, and this is where I'm going to kind of like shape my future career that way.
Yeah, so definitely hard. Like junior, senior year when I was doing applications, again, things were different then. So interviews were all online. Like I never went to the school and visited. At the time, my now husband, boyfriend, lived in Philly. All my teammates were staying in Philly. Like all my roommates already had jobs lined up. So I was like, I'm gonna stay in Philly. I applied to like Drexel, Temple, I think Arcadia. I applied to like 4 or 5 PT. There's a lot of PT schools in Philly. Applied to all of them. Like I think I got into all of them except for one. Like got waitlisted, whatever. But the price was insane. So when I started, going through everything, I was like, okay, let me look. I applied to Maryland, Baltimore, and then I applied to UMES. My friend Gabby at the time had went there, so I talked to her. Like she advocated for it. It was a smaller group, like a smaller cohort versus Maryland, Baltimore is like a little bigger, and all the Philly schools are bigger. And I had always wanted to go to a big university, but when I chose to play soccer and like continue my soccer career at Holy Family, I was choosing a small school. Like, my class sizes were like 20, 30. Like I knew pretty much all the athletes. Like it's a small school in general. So I was like, maybe I should keep where I'm comfortable and like keep a small school. So UMES started feeling like better and better for me. The interview went really well. I loved the professors that I spoke with. And then the fact that they had in-state residency because I'm from Maryland, or in-state tuition since I'm from Maryland, that was kind of the selling point. I was like, if I get into UMES, I'm going there. Saving like 50 to 80,000 depending on what Philly school I chose for 3 years was definitely, it was a no-brainer for me. And once I got in, I was like, yep, I'll send my money now. Here you go. I'm going there. So, and my parents live on the Eastern Shore. So that was also a nice, only 40-minute drive from Salisbury to them. So.
Yeah, 100%. It's got to be nice to be able to, see and stay close to family that way. And obviously, now that you're in Philly, you're kind of right up the road from them that way as well. And it certainly sounds like throughout your time, you really fell in love with the city of Philly. Like you mentioned, you grew up in Maryland. I call it the Western Shore now, which people laugh at me for. Apparently, it's like the DMV or something like that. But obviously, you grew up in that area. You go to Philly for college. Now you live in Philly, and it certainly seems like you're just so attached to that area. And I mean, I have not spent nearly as much time in Philly as you have, but it certainly seems like an area where there's just so much freaking stuff to do. And let me tell you what, that city really loves their sports that way. My goodness.
Yeah. Speak of that, go Commanders on Sunday because we're gonna beat the Eagles. But yeah, I do. I love Philly. We're in like the Northeast area, so not center city, but just I mean, the food here is just so much better than Maryland. No offense, Salisbury and Moco, but the food in Philly is better. And I mean, I just have all of my like old teammates here. My sister's here now. My husband's here. My family's not far, so it's just somewhere that like felt right. And again, as a PT, I kind of could have worked anywhere, so it was like, well, might as well go to Philly and see where things take me.
Yeah, 100%. It's like this is the starting point, and from here you can go anywhere, anytime that way. It's really incredible, and I feel like it doesn't necessarily matter where you start, it matters where you finish, but at the same time, starting in the right area around the right people certainly makes it easier to get to whatever end goal you're looking for later in life, I think that way. And I really got to ask because I'm not someone who takes a whole lot of PT students, and for the most part, I'm not really taking any more in person at this time that way. So I guess I've got to ask, what's been the review? What's been the thumbs up, the thumbs down? What kind of things did I do well? And tear me apart a little bit. What kind of things could I have done better when I was working with you that way? Or what kind of things did I like actually teach you, if you will, because I don't think we've had this conversation yet, and I've been dying to know what the
Yeah,
impact has been.
definitely. So before you, all my CIs had like 30 plus years of students. So you and then my next CI also with his first year kind of like in the profession or like second year in the profession, first year taking students. So it was like definitely weird going from somebody who has had like 30, 40 years in the profession, kind of giving me their way to like going to someone who's like relatively near my age, but also obviously knew a boatload more than me being already a year into the profession. Definitely intimidating, like going in just because it was just you and I in there. There wasn't like other PTs. It was in like an athlete academy gym where there was a bunch of other guys that I had no idea who they were. Walking in the first day was definitely intimidating. I guess the main thing I learned from you is like put the computer and the notes away and like use your knowledge on like especially with athletes on strength training, like where they are in their rehab, whether it's introducing plyos and jumping or return to running, and just like work with your patient. I always thought that was crazy. Like you were able to just prescribe all these exercises. I mean, all the split squat variations I'll never forget. And thanks to you, I give them to all my patients. But like just you would just be like, okay, like we're gonna load the quad, for example, for ACL patients, and you would just think of any way that you could, let's say, navigate loading the quad. Because there's a million ways you can go from somebody who's giving somebody a straight leg raise to somebody who's giving somebody a Bulgarian split squat, and like you just knew kind of how to tell which athlete was ready for which thing, and that for me was impressive and like made me want to learn. And I know, like I made an Excel sheet of like shoulder, knee, hip, and just like all the different exercises that I learned working at Athlete Academy. Because sure, I'm could have maybe thought of some of them, maybe not some of the other ones, but you simplified things, but was also able to do things in a different way than other people do. So definitely something I learned, and had to quickly learn your exercises because some of the names that you call things I had no idea.
I'm still coming up with names to this day. Half the stuff I do, I don't have a name for it. Or if there is a name, it's like so freaking long that I'm like, I need to shorten this. There are some exercises that are being named in honor of patients because I'm just asking them to come up
Take
with some
it.
name at this point because I don't freaking know. But I the way I think about exercise and movement, and I'm assuming this is not unique, but it's just a matter of like what intention or what am I trying to drive? What response am I trying to elicit? And what is the intention behind the action that way? So it's like, take the split squat, for example. Like I like to work out of positions that just make sense to me. And for lower body, it's squat, hinge, or lunge. It's one of those three almost every time. So it's like, how can I take that position and modify it to make it a little bit more like what that person might need today? Make sure I write it down so that when they come in next time, I know where I was at. And then it's a matter of do we move the needle forward? Do we move it back? Or do we keep it in the exact same spot? Because the one thing that I don't think people see enough of is it is okay to stay in the same spot. You don't have to blow up every session and start from scratch. Like you can do the same things over and over again and get progress. Like I certainly do that myself, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're in a position where you can actually move the needle forward, like don't be afraid to move the needle forward, but understand it's not just putting more weight on the bar. I think that there's a much more methodological process to it than that. And it's like, hey, I can change base of support, or hey, I want quad and calf because we need some calf strength. Hey, I could actually hit two things in one exercise instead of doing two separate exercises. Or hey, maybe I'm going to play with the tempo. Maybe I'm going to add a hold or something like that. Like there's just so many variables to play around with that I truly think like if you like just constantly are asking yourself, what does this person need? Where were they last time? Where are they today? Like you can really just kind of navigate any progression in the exercise space that you want to with ease. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's just a matter of simplicity too. It's like, to your point, same position every time over and over and over again. It's just one thing is different or two things is different. And it's like having the ability to make those small changes can really create the long lasting results that I think people want. And I think that level of individualization is key too, because it's like, yeah, every athlete might get a split squat variation, but that variation they get is slightly different between them, and the way they do it is slightly different. So the cueing might be slightly different. So I think that that's kind of like how I would look to create that individualized care that way, if you will. And I find it funny that you say about putting the laptop down because the one thing I'm certainly not known for is getting my notes done immediately by the time I leave clinic every day. Sometimes I'm up a little later finishing them. It's the price that I pay, but I certainly think it's a transaction I'm willing to make. I appreciate your honest feedback on everything that way. I guess I've got to ask, we've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about you, we've talked about your knee, we've talked about your soccer career, we've talked about your PT career. Is there anything that we missed or anything we didn't quite cover that you wanted to today?
I don't think so. I think that kind of hit everything.
Yeah, no, for sure. Are
What
there
was
any?
your favorite and least favorite thing of having me as a student?
Oh shit.
Put you on the spot.
I should have prepared for this. I should have known that something was coming here. Favorite thing is just like seeing the growth that you had over time and just being able to like almost like step back a little bit and watch you just kind of like go from someone who's a little bit timid on day one to being able to just kind of like run the show, run the ship, take off with your own people, see your own people, and the relations and connections that you were able to build with people. I mean, there's certainly a number of them out there. Shout out to a certain high school lacrosse team in particular, that I think would just like love to still have the opportunity to work with you that way. And I think that it was really incredible for me to just kind of see you take like the position you're in and just be able to run with it and form these like really deep, meaningful connections with them, and have such a positive impact on them and where they were at in their journey and rehab process that way. And obviously, least favorite is the fact that you had to go back to Philly, because again, I think a lot of those specific girls out there would certainly love to still be able to come in and see you and work with you again that way. But it's just kind of like one of those weird moments for me where I just kind of got to sit back and be like, "Yep, go little rock star, keep going."
Yeah, definitely.
Mackenzie, for people who want to find out more about you, where can they find you at online?
Online they can go on. I have a still student PT page, but I need to change that. I haven't really been on it much since I started working. Let me see what the username is for that because,
Is is it about to be Mackenzie.dpt?
yeah, it will be that. Mackenzie.dpt.
So it'll be Mackenzie.dpt very soon. Until
Yeah.
then, it's SPT, but it'll soon be DPT.
Yes.
That's awesome, Mackenzie. This is such a pleasure, and I really appreciate the connection we've been able to make, and I appreciate your time and just love all the things that you're doing to kind of turn around and give back to the space that certainly helped mold and shape you into the person that you are today. And I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I honestly am so honored. I've been hearing about the podcast and listening to them since I was your student, and now I'm on here. So it's pretty cool.